Welcome back to another North Carolina Tar Heels football podcast here on TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you are watching us on our rapidly, and I mean rapidly, growing YouTube channel that is Tar Heel Illustrated, I'm THI publisher Andrew Jones, and joining me is THI staffer and budding jack of all trades, Mr. Brandon Peay. And Brandon, we're back for part 3 of our position group preview series, looking ahead to the start of Carolina's football season. Tar Heels open August 27th at home against Florida A&M, so that is less than 2 weeks from today. We have been ensconced in fall camp, which ended Sunday night. Classes started Monday, and the Tar Heels are in more of a normal game week mode now as they prepare for the Rattlers and the 2022 season. So we're going to discuss defensive line tonight. Okay. We hit on the secondary first. In the second podcast, we hit on the linebackers, and now it's defensive line. And Brandon, this group is loaded. Yeah. Perhaps more than any position group on the roster, this group is loaded. Let me throw a couple numbers out here for everybody to absorb. Let this sink in. We're talking about 11 defensive linemen, traditional defensive linemen. We're not going to discuss Jaleel Taylor because he's out indefinitely. We're not going to discuss Tamari Fox. He cannot play this year. Of the 11 linemen, traditional linemen, I'm talking Reva Hassett, Kevin Hester, Cayman Rucker, Miles Murphy, Travis Shaw, Dez Evans, Keyshawn Silver, Bo Atkinson, Javari Ritzie, Jacoby Cowan, the transfer from Ohio State, who's from North Carolina. Of those 11 kids, 8 were 4 or 5 stars coming out of high school. 7 were members of the Rivals 250. Then if you throw the Jack in there, and we did some Jack stuff with the linebackers, we're doing some Jack stuff with the defensive line because they're considered defensive ends in many respects. Yeah. There are 4 guys on the roster listed as Jacks. 3 of them were 4-star players. So 11 of the 15 in this group were 4 or 5-star prospects. This is a very talented room, Brandon.
Yeah. Well, you know what they say, AJ, every correction is an overcorrection. And when Mack Brown first got to North Carolina, he had no depth at defensive line. I mean, he had Strobridge and Crawford. They had to play the majority of the snaps. So, Mack Brown hit the recruiting trail and he corrected. And now the defensive line is the most exciting group. It's a lot of highly touted guys who haven't quite broken out yet. But there's a lot of guys that are bubbling that could break out. And if some of those guys who aren't necessarily starters, but the rotational pieces, if they start to emerge and live up to their high school recruiting ranking, then UNC will have like a lot of big bodies, a lot of elite bodies in that rotation. And, there aren't many elite college football programs out there. But the one thing that all the elite college programs have in common is they control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And with as many bodies and capable bodies that North Carolina has in that deep defensive line room, they'll be able to control the defensive line of scrimmage at least.
Bubbling is a really good way of putting it because a lot of these kids are just figuring out what they are as football players and where they could be going as football players. You brought up 2019, Mack's first year. Dina's working on a piece where she's going to compare the position groups when Mack got there and what they are now with respect to star ratings. Jaleel Taylor and Tamari Fox were primary reserves on that team, and no disrespect to them. Tamari's a nice player, but Jaleel wouldn't be in this top 11 probably. He might be in there because he's experienced and they at least know what they can get out of him for a few snaps. Tamari might be in the middle of this group. Yeah, I would say he's a solid player. I think that if most of the guys in this group hit close to their potential, they should be better than solid. Yeah. So this should be a really good group. But the bubbling comment, I love that because that means, yes, there's a lot of highly decorated dudes in there, but it's like a bird kicking out of its shell. They still got some shell on them. And that's important that people need to understand. Just because Travis Shaw was a 5-star kid doesn't mean he's going to be a first-round NFL-type talent this year. Yeah. Just because Keyshawn Silver came in ballyhooed and had to deal with a little bit of injury stuff and some weight stuff and everything else. It doesn't mean that his process needs to fit what everybody else expects his process to be. He's probably going to be a guy that it's going to take a little longer maybe to get there than some other dudes, and that's fine because every athlete has their own path. Every athlete has their own speed with which they get places. But collectively, there's a lot of answers here. There's a lot of dudes that can rotate. And talking to a bunch of their teammates, as you have this past month, the past few weeks during fall camp, like they can get 4 snaps, pull them out, put 4 guys in. There's no drop off. Yeah. Gene Chizik even said, if I've got a switch, if they've been on the field for a lengthy drive and the other team is inside the 10-yard line, I have no problem taking 3 or 4 new ones, sticking them on the field in that spot, in that situation, and being confident they can get the job done. That's where this line is right now.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And then you got to think about it. They got a guy like Ray Hasek returning who had the highest run defense grade on PFF out of anybody on the team. And they have so many younger guys who are, like we said, bubbling and up and coming. But if those guys don't pan out, they still have a guy like Ray Hasek. They have Miles Murphy. They have guys like that who they know they can depend on for 60 and 70 snaps. So they kind of like a security blanket, So that's also a good thing for this group.
Well, I want to hit on that group right there because who were the 3 that were not 4 stars? Ray Hasek, 2-time ACC All Honorable Mention. Kevin Hester, who played 1 year in high school, was a basketball player. He 4 practices into spring football when he first decided to play football, when someone had to show him how to hook the chin strap up and how to tie up the shoulder pads, he was getting offers because he's so impressive. But he was raw. He's a blank canvas when he arrived at Chapel Hill, and they love him, and he's going to play a lot this year. And then there's Cayman Rucker. I remember when Cayman committed, some fans on the board are like, what are they taking this guy for? They can do better than that. Well, this is an example where you have to trust the staff and trust their evaluation and what they see. Cayman, I think, is a kid that's clearly played above the ranking, but the ranking was obviously off. And he's someone that can get a lot better. And the fact that Cayman can line up outside, can line up inside, makes him so valuable. And then you throw in Miles Murphy. Surprising as it may be, he was a 4-star. And by the way, Rucker was a 3 and Hester was a 3. Hasek went to junior college at high school. He had no offers for anything. He made himself what he is. Miles Murphy was not in the Rivals 250. He is a 4-star kid. I think what hurt him somewhat is there's another Miles Murphy who's highly decorated down at Clemson, who's in the same class. And so people are like, oh, well, there's only one Miles Murphy, but there are 2. And the one at North Carolina could play himself into the first round of the draft by next spring. So, but those 4 guys, I think what you're going to get from him at the very minimum. And that's kind of where the defense comes from. All the other dudes, big time talent. Dez Evans has got a load of talent, but we haven't seen. He's still bubbling. We're going to use your term, bubbling. Jabari Ritzie had flashes, but he's just in his 2nd year, so he's still bubbling, right? Yeah. Keyshawn Silver, clearly still bubbling. He's trying to figure out how to bubble. KBJ, been banged up. He was a 4-star kid. He was number 98 in the class. He's still bubbling. Bo Atkinson, true freshman. I think Bo looks like a guy that he would get on the field for a lot of teams this year. He's a true freshman. He looks the part, but he's still bubbling, right? And then even when you look at the Jack, Chris Collins and Noah Taylor, they're going to play a lot. But Malachi Hamrick is a beast. Yeah. And he's learning his way around. Gabe Stevens was another 4-star kid learning his way around. I like the fact that the foundation of the line were the guys that weren't at as ballyhooed, which means the other guys have a lot to strive for, and they have tremendous lessons in front of them with which to learn from. So I think that room has a great culture. I think that room is loaded in talent. That room has tremendous potential, and it could be a lot better the day after Thanksgiving when the Wolfpack visit Kenan Stadium than it is when the Fighting Irish visit Kenan Stadium in late September. I think we will see a clear trajectory in the overall growth of that group.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I said this on Twitter a few weeks ago. Once these kids get to college, however many stars they have beside their name is irrelevant. Like they get out there and they compete. Like Cayman Rucker he was only a 3-star kid. But when you look at, the one thing that I think the star rankings come from projected potential based on like, your height, your arm length. But the one thing that trumps all of that is production on the field. And that's one thing that Cayman Rucker is always doing, is producing. Even if he's always in the backfield, even if he isn't hitting the quarterback or even if he's isn't making a play, he's always in the backfield. And when you're that guy, no matter how big or small you are, the coach is going to find a way to get you in the game. And I think that's what he's done. He's made a way to stand out, to get himself on the field among a talented group.
I think the star rankings, they don't measure heart.
Yeah.
They don't measure football acumen. They don't measure certain intangibles. A lot of them are derived by what kids look like when they go to camps. I know Rivals has a national camp series where they go around the country. They're in Charlotte area every year. They're down in Atlanta, DC, Chicago area, Dallas, Miami, Tampa, that kind of thing. And a bunch of kids come to the camps, but that's not totally football. And that's where the star rankings come from. However, the star rankings do mean that kids check a lot of boxes.
Yeah. They're right a lot of times.
It means a kid. Yeah, well, Alabama's not bringing in a bunch of unranked kids.
Yeah.
They're bringing in 4 and 5 stars because here's the thing, it's not a guarantee, because when Mac got to Carolina, Zach Gill was on the defensive line. And he was a highly touted 4-star kid from Wake Forest. I was at his commitment press conference. Wake Forest is right down the road from where I live. And he never materialized. He had trouble getting on the field at Carolina, so he left. So there's no guarantee. Star ranking, you're right, doesn't mean anything. However, when 11 of your 15 are 4 or 5s, if half of them pan out and play to their star ranking, that's pretty damn good. Yeah. And that's where this line is at this point. But I think it's important that people understand that a lot of these guys are in the earlier stages of whatever it is they're going to become. Yeah. So you can't expect when Keyshawn Silver gets 8 snaps against Appalachian State and Boone that he's going to look like a finished product, because he's not yet. And that's what's important. But that's also, again, going back to Vahasek, Hester, Rucker, and Murphy, in particular Vahasek, Rucker, and Murphy. They're not finished products, but they're seasoned products at this point. They have really made something of who they are as football players. And I think the staff knows exactly what they're going to get from those guys. And they can anchor this. Rucker isn't going to lead them in snaps, but he's going to play a lot. And he can play situationally too. He doesn't have to be on the down. He's not a one-trick pony out there. He could do a lot of stuff because that guy has he has the smarts. He's got the heart. He's got the engine. He's technically very, very sound. And he's one of those dudes that sometimes a higher ranked kid looks at and says, man, I've got all these boxes checked. Why aren't I playing in front of that guy? Well, because that guy's got a dude motor. And that's one of the things I love about Cayman Rucker. And he can sing, by the way, too.
Yeah. Jack of all trades right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about Dez Evans? What do you? I know I'm not the host, but I would like to get your thoughts.
No, that's okay. This is a discussion. This is you and me talking without AJ's cuss words.
Yeah, pretty much. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on Dez Evans' season? Like, how do you think he can impact the Tar Heels this season?
Well, I think he has to be really good. I think he's one of the guys on there that Miles Murphy must produce. Dez Evans must produce. In order for Gene Chizik's defense to work, they need a traditional rush in to be a heat-seeking missile after the quarterback. Yeah. And that's what Dez needs to be. Dez says he's home. He needs a hand in the dirt. And I love the fact he said dirt, not ground, when he was talking to us the other day, because you got to have – I know that the dirt doesn't exist in college football anymore because everybody plays on fake fields, which I hate. I wish they played on real stuff. Some still play on the real stuff. But I love that he said hand in the dirt, because that's the mentality that he needs. Dez did not – he was not very good his first year because he was playing way out of position. I think that sort of messed up his mind. I think he was slower because he was thinking so much. And there were times where maybe the physicality wasn't there. The Kieran Williams play against Notre Dame, when he had that little flare and he was coming toward the sideline right near the end zone, and Dez had an opportunity to lay him out and didn't. I think that's one of those moments. That's one of those moments of growth. I'm not being critical. I'm highlighting a moment of growth where everybody has, no matter what they do, no matter what your job is, or no matter what if you're trying to build a garden in the backyard for the first time, you're going to screw up for a while, no matter what it is. So you have those moments, and what do you do with them? Do you learn from them? Or do you just say, screw it? Well, Dez didn't say, screw it. Dez has learned from that. So if he is a physical force on the field and it matches his athletic gifts and what I think is an unbelievably improved mindset and a kid who totally understands his role, what he needs to do, and is very comfortable with where he is now as a football player, to me, that all points in the direction of breakout season.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
I don't think it's unfair to expect that a 4-star kid who was number 76 in his class, other services had him as a 5-star kid and ranked even higher. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect him to explode and have an all ACC season. Maybe not first team, but if he's a second team guy, and he's forcing quarterbacks out of the pocket on a fairly regular basis and running into that other athletic ability they have on defense and disrupting plays that way, this defense is going to be significantly upgraded.
For sure. On PFF, they track how often a player is rushing the quarterback when they're on the field in passing situations. And, most defensive linemen, they're going to be in the 98 to 100 percentile range. Last season, Dez Evans was like in the mid 80s. So as that number can jump up to like the 98 to 100 percentile range, I'm guessing it's going to be closer to the 100 percentile range than 98. And he can focus strictly on getting after the passer and perfecting his craft. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I'm going to say Dez Evans will have a double-digit sack season this year, THI exclusive.
Well, he and Noah Taylor are sort of they haven't formally wagered yet, but they're going back and forth about who's going to get more sacks. Noah let us in on that the other day before we had started an interview with him, and because Dez was standing over there too. Dez is huge, by the way.
Yeah.
He's chiseled now. But, Noah wants to get 10. Dez wants to get 10 as well. So obviously if they do that, maybe if they meet the quarterback together, they get a lot of half sacks together. That would be pretty cool. That 80 rating that you're talking about, a lot of that's because he was playing hybrid.
Yeah.
He didn't have a hand on the ground. And I have a piece that I'm not sure if it's run yet when this comes out. We're recording this a couple days before we actually run this, but it's about searching for inches on defense. And the key about searching for inches is when the ball snap, are you off? Or do you have to think for a second and then you're off? It's that second that you think before you're off, you're losing inches. And in some cases, you're losing feet with some of these guys. And so if Dez Evans is losing inches and perhaps a foot or two on the snap, then that's how you go. That's how you go from being what should be a guy in the 90s to a guy in the 80s and something like that. So now, hand on the ground or hand in the dirt, ball snap, drop to the quarterback. That thinking on the snap, that delay is not going to be there. It's not going to be there for him. It's not going to be there for anybody on defense. At least it shouldn't. And that's why this defense should make a significant jump, because so many of the missed tackles last year, guys hitting on the side instead of meeting head on a little bit more. If you get your shoulder into somebody, into the direction that they're running, the opposite direction, come at them, you're going to knock them down. But if you hit them from the side, they could shed you and they could continue moving forward and gain more yardage. So those are a lot of the things people will see from the defense, but a lot of it's going to be defensive line. And I think another thing, Brandon, and you as a former lineman, we both understand a lot of the gap play and stuff like that. Yeah. They were very gap control oriented last year. Now they're going to be a little more aggressive. Get through there. Make hits, hit in the backfield. The emphasis on stopping the run on first down and putting teams in positions where they could be a little bit more predictable is absolutely a point of emphasis. And all of that starts up front.
Yeah. Penetration kills everything. And I think they have a more emphasis on getting, like you said, getting back there, penetrating the backfield and making the plays back there. I know you just said this, but last year they were so gap oriented and they would just be in their little 2-yard box and they would never, and then it would be a play action situation. And now now they need to rush the passer. And now they're behind the 8 ball. If that makes sense, if that makes sense what I'm saying. So
absolutely it does.
Yeah. So I think this year with them being more aggressive, having more simplified roles is really going to help them out to get after the passer, but it's also going to help them win the run game because being so aggressive, they're going to be in the backfield, and that penetration is going to deter a lot of run plays.
Now, regarding the jack position as being a part of the defensive line, what they are is they're athletic defensive ends who can do lots of stuff. The term jack comes from jack of all trades. Oh. Maybe I should just call you and Dina the THI Jacks from now on. But it comes from jack of all trades, and there are a lot of things that they can do. That's why a guy like Noah Taylor is a perfect jack. He played 5 different positions on defense in Virginia. He actually played safety against Clemson one game. 6'5", 240-pound safety. That's pretty interesting. So what their job is to set the edge, and to get after the quarterback. So there's a lot of DN stuff right there, but they also can drop in coverage. One of the things that Noah told us, and this is more the linebacker side of the jack, is that they're supposed to give relief to the corners. You don't want the corners constantly in press mode. They can give relief to the corners. They can play under some of the routes, that kind of thing. That's the LB mode of the jack. But the DE mode of the jack is setting the edge and getting after the quarterback. So imagine Dez Evans with a hand in the dirt on one end and Noah Taylor, who's supremely athletic, on the other side. You got 2 heat-seeking missiles going after the quarterback like that.
Yeah, so when we're at practice and we're watching drills, the jack, everybody that they have at the jack position, even from first string all the way to whoever the last string is, every one of those guys they're extremely explosive coming off the edge. And it's more than just Noah Taylor. We've heard a lot about Chris Collins developing. They have Malachi Hamrick coming off the edge. They have Gabe Stevens, who was a highly touted recruit. So they have a lot of guys in that room. And they're all explosive coming off the edge. And I think they're going to do some things in coverage, but I do think the majority of their job is going to be to try to get after the passer and create havoc in the backfield.
Yeah, I think they're more DE oriented. Collins, by the way, played some defensive end, some traditional defensive end. We played that his first year, but he played early. Played around 20 snaps in the second game that year against ECU. And they just threw him out there. He wasn't ready. He wasn't big enough. He wasn't ready. It looked it. But he still played it, and now those experiences benefit him. Then he played the hybrid, so now he's a jack. He's in his 3rd position since he arrived at Carolina. He was a 4-star kid from up there in Richmond, Virginia, and he loves what they're doing. And it's interesting because Gene Chizik said Chris Collins could coach not just the jacks, but he could coach the defense. Yeah. He's that smart. He's that seasoned. He's seen that much in college football. So I think Carolina's in really, really good hands at the jack position. I think that they're potentially in terrific hands along the defensive line. I think they're good already. And the ceiling for the defensive line, I think right now, I wouldn't even say there is a ceiling.
Yeah,
because
I agree.
I expect continual growth from this group. They should get a lot better. And if they're really good up front, it's going to make things easier for the corners. I think it's going to make things less stressful for the safeties. I think one of the reasons that the safeties were so inconsistent is they were highly stressed at all times. I think they'll be less stressed now, and I think that will allow for more consistency. So if you're a Carolina fan, which you probably are, watching or listening to this podcast, and you want to see a dramatic difference on defense, and you want to see a lot less head-scratching stuff, it begins up front. Mm-hmm. And the parts are there. There's no excuse for this to be a bad defensive line or even a mediocre average defensive line. This should be a well above average defensive line at the minimum. The parts are there. The coaching is there. There's enough sprinkled in experience there, especially in that jack position. And I expect the Tar Heels to be pretty damn good up front this year.
I agree. I 1,000% agree.
For Brandon Peay, I'm Andrew Jones. You are listening to another North Carolina Tar Heels football podcast, part 3 of our 9-part series previewing the 2022 football season. Make sure you go on over to THI, check out all of our stuff. If you're not a subscriber, it's just $8.33 a month. You can be a Tar Heel insider too. Like this video, share it, become a subscriber, tell all your friends about it, and make sure you check out the next 6 videos in this series. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you.